I call this bankrupting the Boy Scouts. Many people saw that actually it was either late, I think it was late Monday night or this morning, the Boy Scouts filed for bankruptcy. The Boy Scouts of America have been in existence over 100 years. They filed for bankruptcy. They have, as you likely know, been entangled in litigation over the years, much of it involving claims of sex abuse. Boys, young men, and some teenagers and some young boys, members of the Boy Scouts, their families had sued the Boy Scouts over sexual abuse that occurred at the hands of somebody within the Boy Scout organization, and the potential damages that were going to be found against. The potential for how much if all these suits are successful and you get a jury to agree and you get awards against the Boy Scouts. Literally, the Boy Scouts of America were forced to file bankruptcy because of the amount of damages they face in these cases. And so, I'll tell you a couple things. Some of these cases, in fact, many of them, precede the time that the Boy Scouts of America decided. They have two relevant decisions that were made in recent years relating to the Boy Scouts. One had to do with a decision of the Boy Scouts to permit Boy Scout leaders to be gay, to have adult men who are gay be Boy Scout leaders. That decision was made by the Boy Scouts in 2015, I think it was. Previous to that, the Boy Scouts had decided that they would admit boys, members of the Boy Scouts, whether they're, I assume middle school, high school age boys, to the Boy Scouts who are gay. So the Boy Scouts had opened their organization to gay members, junior high school age, and as well as gay Boy Scout leaders. Previous to that decision, though, previous to both those decisions, the Boy Scouts had already incurred lawsuits. There had been numerous lawsuits against the Boy Scouts about sexual abuse by male Boy Scout leaders against boys when the parents aren't around, the families aren't around. You picture Boy Scout camping trips or the 2-week camping that or longer periods of time boys go away to Boy Scout camps. But there were thousands of cases, thousands and thousands of individual litigation by boys, and some of them now grown, but they're suing about what happened when they were children or teenagers, suing the Boy Scouts and claiming that they were victims of sex abuse at the hands of male Boy Scout leaders. Now, the fact that those incidences which those boys are suing over, they're obviously suing over claims made against someone or several someones in the Boy Scouts who at least you could characterize as pedophiles, people who engage in sexual conduct with children. That's what pedophiles are. So you had male Boy Scout leaders taking Boy Scouts, young minors, on camping trips and engaging in pedophilia, engaging in sexual conduct with these boys. Many of the boys, emotionally damaged, didn't want to tell their parents. Their parents had told them to respect and honor and love the Boy Scouts. So those cases were piling up. And then the Boy Scouts, you got to recognize, they had those cases. They recognized the problem. And much like some of the dioceses in the Catholic Church, the answer or the reaction of the Boy Scouts was to hide it, to cover it up, to try to settle it, to do something other than deal openly with the problem, find out who the wrongdoers were, get them the heck out of the Boy Scouts, and maybe get them prosecuted if the facts were justifying prosecution. But the Boy Scouts tried to hide it, and they did not affirmatively step up as they should have and said, you know what, we are an organization here that are trying to advance the lives of young boys, trying to instill morals and values and all the good things Boy Scouts do. So the Boy Scouts had a hard enough time before they openly accepted gay Scout leaders. They had pedophiles for Scout leaders. Then they had openly gay Scout leaders. And the number of cases and the potential damages piled up and piled up and piled up to the point the Boy Scouts had to declare bankruptcy. And I saw a number recently. It's very, very interesting to tell you. The Boy Scouts, you would think would be a relatively, they've been around 100 years. A lot of churches and other people supported them. I will tell you just one example. The Delaware Boy Scouts of America early Tuesday filed listed assets when they did their bankruptcy filing, listed assets of $0 to $50,000 and dollars that they had available, and liabilities of $100 million to $500 million. Pretty big numbers. There was another number, though, and I guess I'm not going to find it quickly, but another number where they talk about the overall. I mean, there are other cases in which they have lawyers who've collected groups of boys as their clients, and so I don't think it's not a class action, but they're lawyers specializing in taking individual case on behalf of boys against the Boy Scouts. They had another one. In fact, there was a verdict in a Portland courtroom, a verdict of $19.9 million against the Boy Scouts in 2010 on behalf of one man who was sexually abused as a boy in the 1980s. And, the show is about preserving America. The show is about being able to talk about the issues that face America. The show is about the idea of preserving not just the legal structure of America, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the rule of law. It's also about preserving the moral fabric, the fiber, the culture of our country. Let me ask you, if you were the parent, say you had, 3 teenage daughters, and they were part of Girl Scouts, and they love camping trips. And by the way, I love Girl Scouts. I was a Girl Scout for a long time, love camping. Main reason I stayed a Girl Scout, love camping. But suppose that your daughters came home and say, hey, the coolest thing, our Girl Scout troop has a plan for a big camping trip. We're all going to go camping. And we found a new leader for our troop, a group of leaders. We found these guys in this local college. You're in a college town, this local fraternity. We got 3 fraternity guys, ages 19, 20, and 21. And these fraternity bros, turns out they love camping, and they want to be our Girl Scout leaders. And so, hey, what do you think, Mom and Dad? What about our troop of 12 young girls going out camping for 2 weeks with guys who are in the local fraternity, 19, 20, 21 years old? Isn't that a great idea? Now, I'm going to tell you, I am making that analogy to make a point. Every parent in America would say to their daughters, no, honey, you're not going to go. You're not going to have a bunch of girls going camping in the woods with a bunch of, yahoos from the local fraternity in the college as your Girl Scout leaders. No, we're smarter than that. We understand this is not wise. They may be nice men. They may actually love camping. But this is not the way that Girl Scouts functions. You don't have Girl Scouts going camping and being led by a group of leaders who are a bunch of straight guys, in their, even if they're 30-year-old guys, a bunch of straight guys, a bunch of 30-year-olds in your town, a bunch of straight guys, unmarried guys. Hey, we love to take the girls camping. You would know better. You would say, no, actually, that's not good. Because you recognize you're sending your child off in the woods, unsupervised, no other adults around, with people who may be sexually interested in them. You would figure this out. It's not hard. It's the same thing for the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts have to be able to say that they are going to have Boy Scout troops that are led by people who will take these boys out in the woods camping for weeks and a weekend or weeks on end. And you don't want to have people who are the leaders of those Boy Scout troops be people who may be sexually interested in these young boys. Whether they are pedophiles, whether they are just gay men, whether they are a gay scoutmaster who swears that he's a gay guy, but he's not going to do anything to these boys in this camping trip. You can use common sense. For the same reason, you wouldn't have your daughter's Girl Scout troop out the door with a 30-year-old straight guys taking him camping. You shouldn't have the Boy Scouts agreeing that men who are pedophiles or men who are sexually interested in men should not be taking the boys camping. This is not hard. But I have to tell you, folks, I even debated this morning covering this story in the show because I can't tell you how many people, my show is growing, it's got a great audience, and I have a lot of my political buddies telling me, look, stay away from the LGBTQ issues. Just stay away. They're too controversial. People will get turned off. People will get upset. Stay away from the issues that are potentially too controversial because it could hurt your show. But I got to tell you, folks, being silent is exactly what the LGBTQ mafia wants. When people, I read in reading about this Boy Scout story, read the Fox News story, read the LA Times story, read other mainstreamish outlets covering the story of the Boy Scouts filing bankruptcy precisely due to the fact that they don't have enough money to pay off all of these lawsuits against the Boy Scouts. And the lawsuits are about sexual abuse at the hands of men who run Boy Scout troops. And not one of those articles even mentioned the fact that obviously these leaders, some of these leaders who committed this are pedophiles, that it may have been a mistake for the Boy Scouts to agree to have gay scoutmasters taking over troops. It's like they can talk about the sexual abuse cases, creating liability that the Boy Scouts cannot afford, but they can't talk about how we got here. How is this? How could we get to the point where you have these kind of cases being, how factually did we get there? Now, I'm not saying, I will say, the Boy Scouts, any organization in this country today, you have to be very, very careful with young people. You have to protect them. You have to you have to vet people you're going to agree to lead these troops. It's going to take these kids camping. You've got to look at who they are, what they've done, what their backgrounds are. But the idea, as a blanket matter, as the Boy Scouts of America decided, due to LGBTQ pressure, that they needed to agree to have gay scout leaders, and that somehow that was going to make their organization stronger, more inclusive, better, more justified. This is pure insanity. And the insanity in part comes, or another aspect of the insanity is that even articles talking about, gee whiz, Boy Scouts of America, a revered organization, is filing bankruptcy because of all the sex abuse cases against it. And no one in these articles says, really, well, where did the sex abuse come from? Who's conducting this? I mean, they're not talking about, at the headquarters of the Boy Scout organization and some female secretary being sexually abused by a guy. They're talking about adult men sexually abusing children. And yet we can't talk about that. You can't point out why this might have been a problem. It's the same problem you have when you have the transgender issue, where you have people arguing that men or boys who have male anatomy ought to be able to go use the showers, the locker rooms, everything else they want to, that the girls are assigned to girls because they identify as a girl. I mean, when those cases and arguments first came out, I thought, is anyone going to state the obvious? That there are going to be boys who say, oh, yeah, I identify as a girl, and they're going to use the girls' locker rooms and showers and changing rooms and restrooms and end up sexually assaulting girls, which happens, which we report these cases, and of course, immediately the left goes, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous, that's overblown, okay, a tiny little percent. There's no reason to let people who have male anatomy use a restroom that is reserved for girls and women. There's no reason they have to use the showers. There's no reason they have to use the locker rooms. There's no reason to let a male with male anatomy use the facilities assigned to girls. But what I just said is about as common sense as 2 + 2 is 4, but it's practically forbidden to say in this country. We're getting to the point you can barely even argue these issues, but people have to speak out. The Boy Scouts, I'm terribly sorry they're bankrupt. I wish I could straighten out these things, but it is a crazy, crazy world we live in, that we can have boys and the sex abuse cases causing the Boy Scouts of America to file bankruptcy, but nobody better talk about why. Well, right here, America Can We talk about why.